My grandpa toasted to the mansion he gave me, but I'd never heard of it. Then I saw my cousin smirk, and what followed made every guest's jaw drop. I expected my engagement party to be the happiest day of my life, but it was the moment when a single innocent inquiry from my grandfather shook my entire reality. It turned out that the people I trusted the most were not just there to celebrate with me. They were systematically robbing my future brick by brick right under my nose. My name is Clara Morrow, and what happened next was not about vengeance. It was about harsh, unmistakable justice. Have you ever had the gut wrenching conclusion that everything you thought was true was a deliberate lie? Stay with me, for this story does not end the way they intended. The air that evening had that delicate golden haze that only comes in early summer, just as the light fades and the vineyard settles into a hushed silence. If I squinted, I could see the ocean glittering down the hill across rows of vines, and visitors laughing as they clinked champagne flutes. It was supposed to be my engagement party. My mother kept insisting it was the time to celebrate you. But to be honest, I felt like a placeholder, a centerpiece dressed in sage green, my hair arranged in delicate waves and a smile affixed to my face like a rigid brooch. Adrienne, Keller, my fiancée, and ever the charmer stood alongside me, immersed in discussion with my cousin, Luca Morrow. Luca had a habit of dominating whatever room he entered, whether he was invited or not. My father introduced me to several board members. This is our daughter, he'd explained. No name, simply daughter, as if my name meant nothing. The music grew louder, mellow jazz, merging with the sound of conversations. My mother floated by, correcting place cards and ensuring that every fork was at the proper angle. I drew her attention right away, not with a warm glance, but with a swift check. Adrienne leaned closer, his voice a hushed whisper. You look stunning tonight. I nodded, but my gaze was drawn to Luca. He was smiling, wine glass up and comfortably seated next to Adrian's chair, the exact seat I had chosen for myself. It's funny how that happened. Just last week, I caught fragments of conversation between my parents near the study concerning a coastal property. I assumed they were planning a trip or investing in something new. I didn't ask. I never did. People like me, the middle child, or perhaps it was just my role in that family, learned to read the silences, not upset the boat, and simply observe. Then the clinking started. A few people tapped their glasses with silver knives, and then my grandfather, Henrik Marrow, rose up. He looked so elegant in his ironed navy blazer with an ancient military pin glittering faintly beneath the patio lights. He wasn't simply a visitor. He was the foundation of our family, the type of man whose words remained meaningful even when the world around him seemed to move too quickly. To Clara and Adrian, he said, his voice clear. May your union be strong, your love be kind, and your foundation steady as the beachside house I gave you 4 months ago. The air left the room, the wind stopped. Everything remained still. I just looked up at him. What house? I inquired, not loudly, not accusingly, just stunned. He chuckled, his gaze surveying the guests. Oh, come on, darling, he murmured slightly too warmly. Don't tell me they haven't let you move in yet. His words landed like stones in still water. Every eye turned and heads tilted. Whispering began with a subtle rustle in the corners of the room and a tense clink of glasses. My mom coughed into her napkin. My dad adjusted his weight. Luca just smiled. I could not move. My chest didn't rise or fall. A house? A seaside mansion? My grandfather peered around again, his face tightening. It is the one from Capra. I signed it over in March. It was meant to be your wedding gift. Did no one inform you? His voice grew sharper, his gaze fixed on my father. Fipe, tell me this isn't what I think it is. Nobody responded. The silence was awful. Then he simply walked away, not dramatically, but dissatisfied. The party did not cease, yet it did change. The laughter became tense. Smiles became plastic. I heard someone say maybe she knew. Another person said, no way. Look at her face. Adrian grabbed from my hand beneath the table, his palm wet. Hey, he said quietly. Maybe this is just a mix up. Don't, I replied, jerking my hand back. I felt something hollow within of me crack open. It was a dreadful feeling to realize that the version of your life you believed in the one you lived was the only one you had. Everyone other had an entirely different script. I got up and strolled past the tables, the music, and the shimmering lights. Nobody tried to stop me. Outside, the evening air was suddenly cooler in stark contrast to the oppressive heat indoors. The lights from the vineyard glowed softly, but the sky above me had darkened as if a heavy curtain had been drawn. I found myself strolling toward the pergola near the olive trees, which my mother had always considered too rustic for photographs. I sank onto the bench, and everything that had never made sense before came into horrifying focus, like the time Mom told me not to go to the south side of town because it was being renovated, or how Luca suddenly started wearing that brand new Omega watch, or how certain topics would just die when I entered a room. I was not angry. Not precisely. Anger is loud, and it burns. This was a colder, quieter betrayal, one so profound that it didn't even realize it was treachery since it never thought of me. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Grandpa. Meet me tomorrow. I believe they stole more than just the house. I simply stared at the words. My palm, still trembling, slightly rested on my knee near the hem of my sage green dress. The diamond ring on my finger gleamed slightly in the pergola light. I raised my hand and watched it catch the dark. For the first time that night, I allowed the silence to settle. I did not sleep. I lay on top of the comforter, still wearing that dress, staring at the ceiling as the fan blades whirled slowly a clock without numbers. I watched the moonlight slither across the wall, then diminish until the sky turned a chilly, bruised blue just before morning. By 8:45 a.m., I was on the road. The address Grandpa had given me took me through twisting canyons past wild sage and sunbaked cliffs until the GPS directed me to turn left onto Ocean View Drive. It was one of those street names you see in glossy real estate brochures that make empty promises. The road narrowed, palms rustled and whispered in the wind. I could smell and feel salt on my tongue. Deep down, I knew what it was. I just didn't realize how horrible that would feel. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there was a Mediterranean-style mansion. White plaster walls shone in the sunlight, soft blue roof tiles reflected in the sky, and a towering wrought iron gate curled like graceful vines. A stone walkway led down to the beach just out of sight. The front garden was full with flowers, including bougainvillea, jasmine, and lilacs. I remember promising my mother when I was about 15 that if I ever had a house by the river, I'd grow lilacs over the front pergola. She had not even looked up. She simply nodded absently and asked if my sister wanted more iced tea. I rolled down my windows. A security man moved forward wearing dark sunglasses and holding a clipboard under his arm. Morning. Name, Morrow. I murmured, my voice more composed than I felt. He scanned his list. Are you coming to see Mr. Luca Morrow? My breath caught. My fingers tensed around the steering wheel. I didn't respond. He simply nodded, pushed a button, and the wrought iron gate groaned open. The driveway twisted gradually uphill, with tires crunching on gravel. I parked at the roundabout and hopped out, my sandals hitting the stone path as if I'd been there 100 times. I lightly touched the side mirror with my palm to ground myself. The winds altered. The aroma of salt and lilac hit me all at once. Too familiar, too strong. I walked up the stairs. The double doors were already opened. A tall woman with a silky ponytail approached me, dressed in linen that appeared to be pushed against her flesh. You must be Clara, she inquired, her courteous grin barely reaching her eyes. I'm Camille Morrow Luca's wife. Her voice had the polished warmth that ladies learn in country clubs. A studied ease. I didn't know he was expecting company, she added, standing aside to let me in. I came into the foyer, a large room with vated ceilings, pristine white walls, and sunlight streaming through huge arched windows. Everything smelled softly of lavender and fresh paint. The floors shined. The furniture was modern in soft gray and pale wood and felt excessively impersonal, like a home that had been arranged for sale. I followed her into the kitchen, where a stack of unopened mail sat on the marble countertop. A pale blue package drew my attention. My name is Clara Morrow. The penmanship resembled Aunt Beatrix's. The stamp was not even marked. I did not touch it. I just stared. Camille grabbed my glance. Oh, something has just been mixed in. Luca has not sifted through it yet. I didn't respond, only offered a slow nod. Then I heard him, Luca's light and carefree voice echoing down the corridor. He stepped in with a silk shirt half buttoned and a glass of iced coffee, as if he were hosting brunch. Well, he said, grinning, didn't expect to see you here, Lena. Lena. I hadn't heard that nickname in years. He took a sip and leaned on the countertop. What motivates you to come out this way? He questioned, still smiling. I met his gaze. Why is your name on the deed? He blinked. Then his smile expanded, not with warmth, but with amusement. Oh, so Grandpa told you. He did not sound concerned. He didn't sound regretful, just entertained. Do you really think they'd ever give you that much power? He murmured, laying his glass down with a clink. Come on, sister. You are intelligent, yet you aren't their favorite. Never was. Despite the fact that the sun was shining, the room felt cooler. He stated it so simply, so casually, as if it were a line from a worn family joke that everyone else understood but me. I did not flinch. I did not argue. I just looked at his face, the little smug curl at the corner of his mouth, the smile individuals give when they've already won something behind your back. I did not cry. That part of me was gone. Instead, I moved slightly and swept my sight across the room. And then, right behind his chair, beneath the edge of his briefcase, I noticed a yellow document with a corner barely poking out. The label was unambiguous, typed in all caps. Glenwood title transfer, followed by a date May 14th, 3 days after Grandpa signed over the gift. I did not reach for it. I simply looked, imprinting the typeface words and date on my mind. My hand slipped into my bag. The subtle click of my phone camera shutter went off once low and quiet, and was swallowed by Luca's subsequent sentence. Do you really think it was yours? He chuckled. I turned back toward the front door. Camille was already on her phone and pretended not to notice. The mail sat undisturbed with my name clearly emblazoned on the pale blue envelope. I did not say farewell. The light touched my face as I walked outside and drove away. I did not respond right away. I just kept walking out the door, down the steps. My shoes seeming unnaturally thin against the stone path, as if they weren't designed to bear the weight of what I just heard. By the time I returned to my car, the heat inside had transformed it into a slow oven. I did not start the engine. I just sat there grasping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing I still owned. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called into work and said one word: personal. By late morning, I was on the road again, this time heading downtown. The traffic flowed in a familiar pattern of brake lights, turn signals, and the occasional horn cutting through the background hum. But inside my automobile, it was dead quiet. The kind of silence that makes your own breath seem deafening. I parked 3 blocks from Marseille's registry office. The structure appeared worn with cement walls, discolored from years of sun and smog. But the inside was chilly fluorescent frigid rows of file desks, computer terminals, and exhausted clerks typing to the continuous, relentless rhythm of ticking clocks. I approached to the front desk and gave my name. The clerk scarcely looked up. Title records? I explained. Glenwood Property Morrow family. Her nails tapped on the keyboard. She then handed me a small scrap of paper containing a number. 4th floor, window 5. I grabbed the slip as if it were holy and located the elevator. When the fourth floor doors opened, the air smelled of old paper and lemon cleaner. A woman sat at window 5 with graying hair tucked back into a low bun and glasses hanging from a thread around her neck. Mrs. Kai had a pin on her lapel. "Can I help you, honey?" she inquired, her voice warm and familiar, in the way only ladies over 60 can make you feel. I moved closer. "I'm trying to look up some deed records. A title transfer for a property gifted by my grandfather." Her gaze softened. "Family property fights," she said more to herself than to me. "You're not the first." She stood slowly and waved for me to follow. Her footsteps were slow but steady as she guided me along a corridor lined with tall cupboards. She hesitated at the one labeled Private Residential 2020 to present and unlocked it with the tinkling of worn brass keys. It only took her a few minutes. She then handed me a big file with yellow and green tabs, saying, "Take your time. There is a copy table down that way." I thanked her, my voice a touch scratchy, and proceeded into the small side room. Its walls were lined with microfiche readers, and in the corner was a lonely copier. I sat down and opened the file. The top paper was exactly what I expected: a transfer deed dated May 12th and signed by my grandfather. The address, lot description, and name, Claire Morrow, were all neatly typed, notarized, dated, and stamped just below his signature. However, 2 pages later, there was something more. A second paper dated May 14th. This one changed my name to Lucas. It appeared official. The same header, the same notary box, but something was amiss. I leaned in closer. My grandfather's autograph. It was not the same. Similar, but not same. Too smooth and perfect, as if someone traced it after a few practice sessions. I then went back to the first deed. A side clause, handwritten, not typed, was scrolled directly beneath the notary stamp. Gift is irrevocable, to be maintained in Clara Morrow's name for full ownership within 100 days. It was signed by Grandpa with the same pen as the one above. The ink had bled somewhat into the page, indicating that it was real ink and handwriting. I read it 2-3 times. Irrevocable. And the second deed, which was filed barely 6 days after the original, was not only dishonest, but also void. They did not expect me to come here. They did not expect me to dig deeper. I copied everything, scanned the clause, zoomed in, and emailed the image to myself, 3 backup disks, and an email address I hadn't used for years. I then headed back to Mrs. Key. "Thank you," I replied softly. She looked up and scrutinized my face. "Have you found everything you needed, honey?" "Yes," I answered, more than I thought I would. She nodded gently, as if she understood everything without hearing another word from me. When I returned to my apartment, the sun was setting low, that odd, nice golden hour in which everything glows, but nothing feels truly warm. I dropped the large folder onto my coffee table and collapsed to the floor, my back against the couch. I accessed my old email and scrolled through stored texts from my mother. "Perhaps you're better suited for an apartment. You wouldn't know what to do with that amount of space. Don't be overly theatrical. You've never liked the ocean." I stared at the words unmoved. It was not simply the house. It never was. It was all the years I'd been taught not to expect anything, not to ask, and not to believe I could ever own anything. Not just property or a house, but respect, trust, and belonging. They handed me leftovers and said it was love. And when I didn't grin, they called me ungrateful. I shut the laptop. The room was completely silent. My breath was quiet, my palms flat against the carpet. Then I picked up the phone. Grandpa's phone number was still saved under D like Dad. An old habit from when I was 15. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, and went straight to voicemail. I did not leave a message. Instead, I opened my camera app, uploaded a snapshot of the scribbled clause, and typed a single sentence. "Did you realize they had falsified your signature?" Then I pushed send and waited. The response did not arrive that night, the next morning, or even for the next 3 days. I tried to divert myself by sifting through work emails, folding linen that had been sitting clean but unwashed for a week, and watering the plant by the window while knowing it was already dead. But my gaze kept shifting to my phone, waiting. 5 days after I sent the message, my screen lit up. I hadn't seen the name Grandpa in about a year. I stared at it until the screen faded, then tapped to listen. His voice was slower now, a little gruff, but it still had the weight I remembered from when I was 8 years old. When he showed me how to carry a compass and never walk in circles, even when you were absolutely lost. Come by tonight. Come alone. That was it. No explanation, no affection, and no fury. Just a quiet demand. It had been raining lightly all afternoon, not in a dramatic way, but in a constant mist that made the environment feel wrapped in gauze. The drive to Nice took over an hour. I didn't listen to music or hum. Instead, I drove with the windows slightly cracked, with the aroma of wet pavement and eucalyptus in the air. His neighborhood had remained unchanged, the familiar brick walls, the creeping ivy, the same gentle creak in the gate hinge. As I walked through Marta Clean, the housekeeper answered the door before I could knock. She appeared older and tired in a manner I hadn't noticed previously, but as she spotted me, her expression softened. "He's in the study, sweetheart," she whispered softly, moving aside. "Hasn't moved for 3 days. Said he was waiting." I said my thanks to her. The hallway was dimly illuminated, with only one antique lamp near the archway. That familiar scent-aged wood fireplace, smoke something vaguely resembling his bay rum aftershave, wrapped about me as I moved farther into the home. The study door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. He was sitting in his worn leather recliner, one elbow resting on the armrest. His attention riveted on the fire, as if it held answers he had yet to discover. He did not turn when I entered. I did not say my name. He simply reached beside him, took up a heavy manila package, and held it out to me without looking. I crossed the room and grabbed it. It was labeled Contingency C. Marrow in small, precise handwriting. I opened it slowly. The paper inside was stiff and slightly yellowed. The first page, a living trust dated 3 years ago, notarized, stamped, and right there plain as day. To Clara, Morrow full beneficiary. Rights to the Santorini Bay Estate and a 35% stake in the Marrow Veterans Memorial Fund. I looked at it, blinking. He eventually turned toward me. His eyes were tired, yet piercing and harsh even now. "They don't know," he continued, his voice lower than I remembered, but not shaking. "None of them ever asked." I took another look at the documents before returning my gaze to him. "This," I whispered. "This goes beyond the house." He nodded. "I was waiting to see who would earn it," he told me. "Do not ask for it. Do not expect it to be handed to them simply because of blood and birthdays." I couldn't keep his look. For a time, all I could think about was the Christmas I'd missed due to a project deadline. Instead of calling on birthdays, I sent cards. I took a hesitant step back, hoping that distance would protect me from the old bitterness. "How come you didn't stop them?" I asked quietly, my voice raw. "When did they file that second deed and replace me?" He shifted, groaning, and leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "Because I needed you to see it," he explained. "To know what they were willing to do and to know what you were not." I swallowed, but the words did not go down smoothly. "Do you think I needed to be hurt to understand?" "No," he responded. "But you had to see what they valued, and it was not the truth." The fire crackled between us. Outside, the wind was picking up, and leaves rustled across the windows. Distant thunder rumbled low over the hills. I assumed I was imagining things. I murmured about how they had cut me out of photos, dinners, and decisions. He did not answer. I ran my fingers along the edge of the trust document. My name was there, printed cleanly. No eraser means no corrections. Nobody has tried to scratch me out here. They constantly complained I worked too hard, was too independent, and didn't show up for my family. I looked up to him. Maybe I didn't, I replied. Perhaps I was working so hard to create something on my own. I stopped showing up for what was actually important. He leaned back and closed his eyes briefly. You showed up when it counted, he remarked. That's what matters to me. For a time, I cradled the papers against my chest, pressing the envelope tight as if it could ground me, tether me to something still real. Then I looked at him. They will resist this. Do you know that his lips twisted slightly? Of course, I don't know where to start. He turned and opened a little drawer built into the armrest of his desk, revealing a fading business card with thick card material and gold embossed edges. He gripped it with 2 fingers. This man represented me in 1986, he explained when I needed someone who didn't blink at messy family affairs. I took the card. The name seemed unfamiliar, but the card's weight felt old world and trustworthy. He doesn't lose, Grandpa explained. The fire popped once loudly and sharply. We both stared towards it and then back at each other. You'll need a real lawyer now, he remarked in a sluggish voice. Not just guts, I nodded. But inside the fire that had begun days before, when I stood on that pavement in front of our family house, was no longer a flicker. It was rising quietly, slowly, but steadily. I didn't get much sleep following that night at Grandpa's. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, repeating every word, an imperceptible pause. His speech had a finality to it, as if he had already passed the torch and was simply waiting to see if I would light it. By morning, I was already dressed, and the coffee was still sitting on the counter. 3 days later, I found myself standing outside a 15-story building in Lyon with aged limestone and unimpressive windows. It felt like a location where secrets were both buried and carefully dug up. The bronze sign near the entryway simply said, Langfeld and Wade LP Private Counsel since 1959. I pushed the elevator button and waited. The receptionist recognized who I was the moment I uttered my name. She stood, nodded, and pointed to the hallway behind the main desk. Mr. Langfeld will see you now, she whispered quietly, as if I were entering a chapel. His workplace smelled like ancient paper and leather-bound books. No antiseptic shine. No clean glass walls, just gloomy walnut shelves, stacked with dusty law journals, and a single clock ticking too slowly over the fireplace. As I walked in, Arthur Langfeld looked up. He was probably in his early 70s, hair silver, but still thick, calm hands and a steady voice. Clara, he welcomed me as if we'd spoken before. Have a seat. I sat down, and for a moment neither of us talked. Then I accomplished what I had come to do. I told him about the title change, the mismatched signature, and how my name had just vanished from the amended deed, as if I hadn't belonged there in the first place. Langfeld listened without blinking, his fingers crossed across a legal pad that he had never touched. He didn't interrupt me once, not even when my voice drew his attention for a second. When I concluded, I anticipated him to ask for more details, clarify, and softly push back with the typical legal care. Instead, he looked me directly in the eyes and said, You aren't crazy. That deed has been altered. Someone was aware of what they were doing and who they were stealing from. I sank back in my chair. He didn't question how I obtained the copy. They didn't ask what I wanted to do. He simply opened a drawer, took out a heavy file folder, and said, Let me show you something. Inside were printouts of old Morrow Estates law firm records, including dates, logs, system access, and permissions. I recognized one of the names right away. Luca Morrow Langfeld tapped a page. Your relative did an internship there 3 summers ago. Had complete administrative access to digital archives and file systems, including the property registry portal. I blinked. You mean he could have changed it from inside, not just could have Langfeld answered? He probably did. Well, know for sure soon. He took up his desk phone and requested Sophia to come in with a laptop. 20 minutes later, a woman about my age entered with a basic gray case. No small talk. She just opened it, powered up the system, and typed, as if she had done it 100 times. Langfeld leaned towards me. She is the best digital forensic analyst I know. I trust her more than I do half of the county's judges. Sophia Dobrev nodded at me and clicked something. Her voice remained flat, quite professional. I discovered information inconsistencies on the scanned deed. The last change timestamp does not match the filing date. And, look here, she said, pointing to a highlighted line of code. This version was created with Adobe Pro, but the original file kept off server, and a cold backup has a different name in the signature field. It is yours. Luca's name was added later. The words sank in slowly. For days, I'd been telling myself I wasn't hallucinating, clinging to that shaky hope. But hearing it like that coded, certified digital proof that I had been deleted on purpose made something inside me become very, very still. Langfeld stood. Will request a freeze immediately. Within 90 minutes, a cease and desist order was emailed to the real estate agency in charge of the Santorin Bay estate. The title was now formally frozen with no new owners or movement pending a complete judicial review. By that evening, my phone had begun to light up. First, I got a voicemail from my mother. You have gone too far, Clara. This is family. This is not the way we handle things. You should have contacted us first. I did not even finish listening. An hour later, another from Luca. I cannot believe you took it there. Legal action for a foolish house. Do you think this makes you look stronger? It makes you appear bitter. I saved both voicemails but did not respond. They had always told me that quiet was a weakness, a sign of failure. But I was learning. Silence could be powerful, especially when it was supported by paper and indisputable evidence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the trust document spread out beside me. The manila envelope remained wrinkled at the edge where Grandpa's hand had folded it. I lit a candle, not for nostalgic reasons, but to break the overpowering blackness. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to save me, explain themselves, or make anything make sense. They would not, but I would. The next day, shortly after noon, I had a tap on my door. I was not expecting anyone. I saw him through the peephole. Nikiko Varga, dressed in FedEx uniform and clutching a flat cardboard envelope and a clipboard. Signature here, he stated, his gaze not lingering. I signed, accepted the packet, and shut the door. Inside was a certified notice of formal arbitration filed by plaintiff Luca Morrow. 10 days from now, downtown courthouse. Case number has already been allocated. I held the paper in my hand, staring at the name. His name is not mine. However, this time I was not the one being deleted. I remained there for a long time after the FedEx man had left, just clutching the notice, hoping it would transform into something else if I gazed long enough. It did not. The name, Luca Morrow, looked back at me from the header printed in immaculate black ink. Below it, the words petitioner demanding arbitration to settle disputed title of the Santorini Bay estate. So he had gone and done it, filed first. The offender claimed responsibility. I should have been astonished, but all I felt was the quiet weight of inevitability, like if a train I'd watched approaching from afar had finally arrived right on time. 11 days flew by in a slow blur. I stayed busy, or at least seemed to. I sorted old files, cleaned places I hadn't touched in years, lit candles I didn't need, and cooked entire dinners I rarely touched. Every small work seemed like armor, something between me and the next battle. And then came the morning of. I dressed slowly. I chose dark blue pants and a blazer that nevertheless retained its shape. I tied my hair up with the black satin ribbon that I always used to feel secure, the one thing my mother never threw away after I left. It's funny how you hold on to things long after the person who gave them to you has stopped seeing you. The office building in Lyon was towering but nondescript. No flashing signs, just another silent tower with too much glass and insufficient warmth. Security let me in after checking my name on the list, giving me a guest badge and directing me to the elevators. Conference room 17B, 12th floor. The hallway outside was cold, and the air conditioning was set too high to be comfortable. Or perhaps it was just me. Inside, the space stretched out. Sterile gray walls, a wide oval table, with 14 high-backed chairs and a carafe of untouched water in the center. 4 arbitrators sat near the head, their suits bland and their gaze unreadable. On one side stood Luca and his attorney, a smug man wearing a pastel tie and twisting a pen like a nervous tick. My mother sat alongside them, arms folded across her chest, hair set, makeup flawless, and face frozen, somewhere between disapproval and scorn. She did not look at me once. Arthur Langfeld took a seat beside me as serene as ever. His presence was a slight consolation, a gentle reminder that I wasn't going through this alone. Still, I felt the void where Grandpa should have been, the silent anguish of it. I had contacted him twice over the last week. No response. We left messages. I was unsure whether it was due to age or decision. Perhaps both. The lead arbitrator spoke first, introducing the session, explaining its structure and establishing expectations for tone evidence and process. Then he stared at Luca. You may begin. Luca stood. He cleared his throat as if he were heading onto a stage. He straightened his tie and wore his smugness as a second skin. Thank you, he started. I appreciate your time. This is not easy, but when someone acts erratically, when they strike out and jeopardize the family legacy, someone has to intervene. I did not blink. He proceeded. I didn't want this, but I've seen my cousin spiral. She's made crazy decisions, questioned everyone's intentions, and accused us her own blood of conspiracy. He paused for effect before holding up a folder. Here are the texts Clara gave to me and others. I'd like to present these as proof. The arbitrator nodded. Luca's lawyer stood and handed copies across the table. I looked down, printed dozens of screenshots. At first sight, they appeared familiar. My name, avatar, and tone, but something wasn't right. Words I'd never used. Wording that was too cutting and vicious. One message said, I'd sell that house only to see it burn. Grandpa is too old to stop me. Another, I've never bothered about relatives. I only want what's mine. They can rot. Gasps resonated quietly across the room. The arbitrator looked up. Miss Morrow, do you wish to respond? I swallowed. That's not me. I said, my voice softer than I preferred. I never wrote those. Luca smiled as if he had already won. Your Honor, I have the whole log's metadata and timestamps. Langfeld stood slowly. With respect, we'd like to reserve full rebuttal until later in the session. The arbitrator nodded. We moved on to protocols like legal positioning and chain of custody. I could barely hear it. All I could think of were those words. My mother glanced at the printouts as if they validated every suspicion she had spoken behind closed doors. I kept thinking he came prepared. He had aid. He is playing the long game. I felt exhausted. And then right before the break, the door creaked open. Everyone turned. Grandpa. He stood in the doorway, slightly bent, but sturdy, with his cane in one hand and a small black flash drive in the other. Langfeld pointed toward him, but Grandpa only looked at me. I stood. He strolled over and, without saying anything, placed the drive in Langfeld's hand before carefully sitting alongside me in the chair that had been left open. He eventually spoke. Let's all stop pretending. His voice was quiet, but it slashed through the air like it had teeth. I may be elderly, but I am not blind, and I have ears in places you won't believe. He looked at Luca. You think the world doesn't talk because it doesn't listen? Do you believe no one sees you talk about drinks with lawyers, or record the mess you make? The room became so silent that it hummed. Langfeld plugged the drive into his laptop, pointed it toward the arbitrators, and pressed play. The first voice was obviously Lucas's. Casual, confident, and laughing. All I did was swap a file, and she's gone crying in her small condo. The easiest con I've ever pulled. Someone at the table took in a sharp breath. Another clip, different place. Same voice. She never intended to do anything. Claire is soft. It always was. Give her a little scare, and she folds. Langfeld let the recordings play one at a time. Then came the real screenshots, messages I had truly sent. Grandpa, are you sure you're good with signing this? I just want you to feel comfortable. I am not hurrying anything. This place is more important to you than anyone else. I love you. You're the only person who has ever truly seen me. My throat clenched, but I did not speak. There was nothing more to say. Luca appeared paler than I had ever seen him. His attorney leaned forward, talking quickly. My mother sat stiff as marble. The leading arbitrator leaned forward. Well, reconvene tomorrow for final statements, but I'll say this. He didn't glance at anyone in particular, but his remarks applied to everyone. Truth has a strange way of surfacing. And for the first time in that cold room, I didn't feel like I was on trial. Truth has an unusual way of appearing. The room emptied one by one. The lawyer's assistants, and even Luca, all faded away like smoke after a fire. Only Arthur Langfeld and I remained behind. I didn't want to move yet. The seat behind me still retained the warmth where Grandpa had sat just minutes before. Langfeld leaned toward me, his voice calm and steady. Are you okay? I nodded. Despite the fact that the solution was much more convoluted, my palms remained flat on the table, recalling the coolness of those written lies and the surprising weight of a flash drive that had altered everything. Outside, the light had transitioned from late afternoon to early evening. The world wasn't aware that anything had broken in and then entirely reset. We returned the following day. The building elevator and drab meeting room were all the same, but something seemed different. Luca was already sitting as I arrived in. He did not glance at me. His tie was slack this time, and the corners of his mouth were tight as if he had not slept. My mother wasn't present. I wondered if she was avoiding humiliation or had just stopped appearing to care. Langfeld and I took our seats silently. The panel of arbitrators came in at exactly 2. There's no small talk or wasted motion. The lead arbiter cleared his throat before looking down at the document in front of him. This arbitration board, he stated calmly, has evaluated all presented material, including digital communications, forensic testimony, and living witness statements. After careful deliberation, he hesitated for a beat. Luca moved in his seat, agitated. We determined that the living trust dated April 18th is still valid and binding. All subsequent documents were found inadmissible due to evidence of manipulation and undue influence. He looked up. All property rights pertaining to the residents at the Santorini Bay estate are to revert to Claire Amaro. Effective immediately, my breath caught. Not in triumph. No. With quiet, profound relief. The sort you don't reveal since the battle may have ended, but the scars beneath remained fresh. Luca murmured something beneath his breath. The arbitrator lifted his eyebrow. Excuse me? Luca straightened in his chair. This was rigged, he said louder now. She got help. Manipulated my grandfather. I played the victim. I stood before Langfeld, could stop me, and whispered, no, in a low but clear voice. What I did was defend what I already had. What you did was theft. Dressed as a family. He didn't say anything, just gazed back, mouth hard, as if he couldn't believe what was going on. I did not wait for the rest. I turned and walked away. Langfeld caught up with me in the hallway, his hand lightly stroking my shoulder. You handled that well, he commented. I didn't do it for applause, I explained. He smiled slightly. I know. We stepped out onto the courtroom square, the sunlight reflecting off the parked automobiles and tall windows. A gentle breeze came up chilly on my face, carrying the aroma of salt air and a tiny tinge of someone's cologne. Then slowly, I heard the unmistakable tap of Grandpa's cane behind us. He moved slowly and cautiously, but his back was straighter than I had seen it in months. He approached me and peered out at the horizon as if it were something more significant than buildings and cars. He smiled. You fought well, he stated calmly. I always hoped it would be you. My throat tightened. There was so much I wanted to say. Thank you. I apologize. I never intended for this to hurt you, but all I could manage was a gentle nod. He grabbed for my hand. We should get lunch, he suggested. I feel like rejoicing. Whatever you want. He chuckled. Anything. What about that cafe on Jefferson? I said. Do they still make that horrible roast beef sandwich you enjoy? I smiled. If they do, I'll make sure they save too. As we began to move toward the valet station, he leaned in closer to my arm. I slowed to match his pace. He stumbled slightly on the curb, but I caught him before he fell. He waved it aside. Just a moment, he said, his voice wavering. These legs are older than you think. I did not let go. The sun hung low in the western sky, producing lengthy shadows on the sidewalk. I felt a shift as we approached the valet desk. His fingers trembled against mine. His weight dropped suddenly too quickly. Grandpa. He didn't respond. He dropped violently, his knees giving way, like if someone had ripped the floor from beneath him. His cane clattered on the ground. I dropped beside him. Call an ambulance, I yelled. People turned. A woman shouted. A man in a suit rushed to take out his phone. Langfeld kneeled beside me, already calling. I grasped Grandpa's hand. His face had turned pallid, his lips bluish. His eyes flickered, then gently settled on mine. Will you stay with me, okay? I whispered. Just stay, please. He gripped my fingers just barely. His voice rang out like wind across gravel. Make it yours, he exclaimed. Make it right. And suddenly nothing. Sirens. I heard them before I noticed the ambulance. The red lights flashed across the glass doors and parked cars. Shout's hands moving quickly, lifting him onto the gurney. I couldn't make sense of the words oxygen and chest compressions. I stood back, completely powerless. Langfeld's hand stroked my shoulder again. Come on, he whispered softly. But I couldn't move because the man who had just given me back my almost lost life was now taking it away. And for everything I'd accomplished, it suddenly felt as if I was losing the only thing that ever truly mattered. They informed me he died quickly and gently, but I don't believe peace feels like that. Not like standing in a hospital hallway with a cold coffee in one hand and a cane in the other, while a nurse apologizes for the paperwork. Wait, I don't believe calm sounds like footsteps leaving you behind, dissolving into silence. It's been 1 week. Before the sun rose this morning, the sky was a dark gray that felt heavy on your chest. At precisely 9:45 a.m., Arthur Langfeld pulled up to the cemetery. Before I looked up, I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. He didn't say much, simply opened the door and waited. There weren't many people there, just Langfeld, 3 of Grandpa's old Navy pals, both wearing fading pins and proud expressions. And Mrs. Lev, the neighbor from the beach house, clutching a casserole dish in her lap like she didn't know what else to do with her hands. No Luca. No Isabel. Of course not. I stood behind the casket, arms wrapped around myself, not from the cold, but from something much colder. They played taps. The sorrowful chords sliced through the still morning air like someone ripping through fabric. My hands shook, but I did not cry. Grief looks different now that you've been through so much. Langfeld placed a folded flag in my hand slowly and gingerly as if it could break. I wish it didn't have to be this way, he replied quietly. I didn't respond because wishing for us didn't seem to change anything. The service did not last long. The older men saluted before departing silently. The neighbor handed me the dish and a firm hug. Langfeld inquired whether I wanted him to drive me home. I told him I had to go somewhere first, which I did. Not the house I grew up in, not the condo I rented downtown. I drove back to the Santorin Bay Estate, the only place that still smelt like him. By the time I arrived, it had begun to rain lightly at first, then consistently. I stayed in the car for a few minutes watching the water hit the windshield. my fingers hanging over the key before ultimately opening the door. The house greeted me in solitude. There are no lights or heat, just the hollow, echoing quiet that only exists when someone has left for good. I walked in gently, leaving my shoes by the door, as Dad always requested. The hardwood floor felt chilly under my socks. I strolled around each area as if I were visiting a museum about us. The living room still had his blanket stretched over the couch, which I used to steal on cold mornings. I touched it, but couldn't get myself to pick it up. In the kitchen, the last mug he'd used was still upside down on the drying rack. I ran my fingers along the chipped navy blue rim. I drifted upstairs. His room smelled of cedar and old cologne. I paused in the doorway for a time. I couldn't go in yet. Instead, I resorted to studies. He always referred to it as the thinking room. Books adorned the shelf, including tattered memoirs, old maps, and older novels with yellowed pages. His desk, which was beside the window, was spotless except for a pen holder, a small brass light, and one drawer. I stared at it. There was a fading sticker on the front curling around the borders. It read, "Only for her." I knew somehow. I just knew that was intended for me. My fingers paused over the handle, then I pulled. Inside was a single thick envelope sealed with wax. My name, written in his hand, was at the center. I sat down before opening it. The letter unfurled slowly unfolds. The paper felt thick as if it held more than just ink. If you're reading this, my time has passed before I can offer you what I've always wanted to give you. More than just a house, a name, and a future. You will inherit all I own, including my company, shares the beach house, and the Provence estate. You are my legacy. He'd signed it. Below his name were notarized documents, legal stamped, and dated only 6 weeks ago. A new trust arrangement, a amended deed. My hands trembled again, but not because of grief. This time for another reason, the powerful, overpowering impact of being noticed. I stayed there for a long time, reading, rereading, and remembering the way he looped his L's and concluded each sentence with a period, as if he still believed in structure and organization. When I eventually rose up, the sky outside had turned a lovely gold from the rain. I strolled out the back door into the patio, still clutching the package. The breeze smelled like the ocean and damp eucalyptus. The waters remained calm. I stepped to the edge where the railing framed the ocean, as he often said, a picture worth sitting still for. I placed my fingers on the smooth, familiar texture of the wood. I reflected on all the times I'd sat there with him. Quiet mornings and late nights with no expectations or pressure, only time. And I whispered into the wind, not too loudly, but enough for the house to hear. You didn't simply leave me a house, Grandpa. You gave me my voice back. Langfeld waited for me to nod before leaving. I watched his pickup disappear down the gravel drive, the sound of its tires drowned out by the wind and waves. Then I turned back to face the house. The flag still folded in my arms, and the envelope tucked against my chest like it was sacrosanct. That night, I did not sleep in the guest room. I lay in Grandpa's bed not to take his place, but to be close what remained of him. His scent lingered on the pillow, faint yet noticeable. I did not cry. I just let the silence wash over me like a blanket. Somewhere in the darkness, I whispered, "I'll take care of it now." 3 months have gone. The home did not stay frozen in time. I didn't allow it. I slowly peeled away the burden. The heavy draperies came down. Light rushed in. I repainted the walls with warm living colors like honey clay and soft olive, not the pristine whites that Grandpa preferred. The stillness, too, altered its texture. It no longer echoed. It hummed. I did not hire a decorator. I used my hands to sand antique banisters, oil the porch swing, and learn how to fix plumbing, using YouTube videos and stubborn resolve. I kept the blanket on the couch, but repaired the damaged edge with blue thread. He would not have minded. He always said that things didn't have to be flawless, just honest. That morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it barefoot while holding a cup of tea. The breeze brought in salty air and jasmine. On the front steps had a mason jar filled with orange ranunculus flowers. A message nestled beside them said, "Still watching the tide for you? Proud indeed." I smiled. I placed the jar on the foyer table next to the shell Grandpa and I discovered after a storm. I strolled barefoot across the floor. I had scrubbed myself, each plank gleaming softly in the morning sunlight. The house seemed cozy, lived in, and loved, not spooky. Later that afternoon, I put on a modest navy dress and pulled my hair back. I looked in the mirror. Still me, but steadier. I took the small folder from the side table, slid it inside my backpack, and went to town. The community center was located at the edge of the bluff, right past the old cafe. Newly painted and landscaped an area for everyone, including small children, veterans, and the lonely. The money from the Provence estate covertly sponsored this establishment. They had asked me to speak despite the fact that there was no press or a name plaque. I didn't have any huge plans. I simply told the truth. When it was my turn, I moved behind the little platform and cleared my throat once. My grandfather would say, "You carry your name on your back. Walk steadily." Several folks grinned. A few people peered down. Sometimes I added, "The family you are born into breaks you, but the legacy you create through grace is unshakable." The room was quiet at first, followed by a gentle wave of applause. Nothing loud or staged, just real. I noticed a few older men nodding caps in their laps medals neatly fastened to their jackets. They didn't say anything, but their gaze caught mine, and I knew. When I arrived home, the sky had softened to a delicate pink that only emerges at nightfall on the coast. I parked the car and kicked off my flats at the door. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard a knock on the side gate. I was not expecting anyone. I crossed the porch and stepped out. The air was suddenly colder. A girl, maybe 17, stood on the other side of the gate, awkward and uncertain, her hair in a loose braid, and a rucksack slung over her shoulder. I recognized their eyes. Elena is Luca's daughter. She did not smile. She only gave me a direct glance. "He told me you were the enemy," she explained quietly. "You were selfish, and you ruined everything, but he never looked me in the eyes while he said it. I just wanted to see for myself." I did not move. I just watched her. She paused. "I do not want anything. I just don't think he told the truth." I remembered the key that was still under the mat, which Grandpa used to joke about just in case someone honest ever knocked. I softly bent down, raised the mat, took it up, and gently placed it in her hand. "Whenever you're ready," I said. She blinked, grabbed it, and nodded. I went back inside without waiting for thanks. That evening, I sat in the back balcony. The sun set low, throwing golden ribbons across the ocean. I traced the letters on the little metal plaque that I had just completed mounting on the gate. Semaro Honorary Heir. The wind blew lightly. I sipped my tea and let the salty air sink in my lungs. I closed my eyes. I never needed their approval. Just a little room to breathe, rebuild, and be. Sometimes it is enough. It is everything.